right, design development phase.
Yes.
The space plan, the furniture arrangements, their final decisions, refinement of the furniture layout, any of that.
So design development on this project went really smoothly, and I think it's because we did provide those options in schematic design, we were able to pretty much zero right into that. Now what we do, the way we approach it typically on a residential project, is the furniture plan is right along with doing the fixed interior finishes, because you need to know what the layout of the furniture is going to be, because it informs other decisions, especially around floor finishes and maybe where transitions might happen. So yes, the furniture plan was approved through DD, and then all of the interior finishes were approved, as well as the details and what the wood species would be, and the specific tiles and the liners, and every single detail was approved before we started drawing and moving into CAD. We had CAD drawings, but they weren't as detailed yet. So DD is really what the opportunity and the time to get the blessing from your client before you move into construction documents. We don't want to waste their time or their money assuming that this is all approved. It's so important to go through that design development phase where you basically tie up the loose ends. So we do it with the fixed finishes and the furniture plan and a finish plan. And then we dive into CDs for the fixed finishes. Design development for the actual furniture pieces and fabrics always comes after our construction documents are completed for the contractor, for the building. And that's to serve the schedule on the project. You know, you have more time to do the furniture, but they need to get that information so they can be looking at the budget and finalizing their pricing and getting their quotes and getting their subs on board. So we usually break it up that way. And then after that's done, we've handed it off to the contractor, then we can jump back over and do the design development for furniture and fabrics.
So you've done both hospitality and residential design. Do you find the design process is different around the SD and DD phase for commercial versus?
No, it's exactly the same. You know, hospitality and light commercial, the process is pretty much the same. I mean, unless you're only being hired to do FF&E, and not fixed finishes, then that's a pretty singular track and pretty constant. But if you're doing all the interior architectural detailing and fixed finishes, as well as FF&E, the process is usually very similar.
Do you mind defining fixed finishes real quick?
Yes.
I should have asked that
That's
earlier.
okay. So fixed finishes are basically all the interior finishes that a contractor would be installing on a project. So that would be all the flooring material, any of the wall finishes being if they're paint, trim, plaster, and then as you move into the wet areas of a project, it would be countertops, cabinetry, backsplashes in a kitchen, all the plumbing fixtures and fittings, any light fixtures and fittings, anything that is attached to the building that when you go to sell it, it doesn't go with you. That's basically what a fixed finish is. All the bathroom finishes from walls, ceilings, floors, tubs, tiles, counters, mirrors, medicine cabinets, all of the details that get built into the project. That's kind of how I look at fixed finishes.
Thank you.
You bet.
Okay, construction documentation.
So construction documents, one of the things that I find really helpful is in that initial marketing phase, if you've been selected to put a proposal together, that you have a conversation with your architect as to what does he do and what do you do and where do you fit into that process. That informs not only your fee estimate and your proposal, but it also informs what kind of documents you're going to be providing on a project. The other thing that I like to do in the early on schematic design, sometimes even programming, is have a conversation then next with the contractor. Say, what do you need from a standpoint of documentation? If we can know that up front when we're doing our proposal, then we know what those deliverables are.
And you build it in.
And we automatically build it in, absolutely. So we have typically approached doing specifications from a standpoint of following the Construction Specification Institute spec guideline. And so essentially you would have your floor finishes, you'd have your wall finishes, you'd have your plumbing specs, have your lighting specs, your door hardware, your doors, your millwork, and basically just following all those divisions. The contractor on this job didn't want that. He wanted more of a traditional format of doing a finished schedule. And then all the plans and specs to go with that. And we're like, that's totally fine. And you know, it really, again, it's that back to, we're part of a team, and how I provide the information doesn't matter to me. It needs to serve how they're used to working. So you'll see that when we go through the drawings, that we put together the finished schedule and all of the construction documents to support that finished schedule. Everything was cross-referenced, and then we also did tile finish boards, and I'm so bummed that I don't have those to show you because they were gorgeous, and everything was labeled, and what we would do is we would take a photograph of them, and then on the back side of that photograph we would label everything again, so that he had the actual finishes to make sure that the supplier was supplying the correct products, as well as then installing the correct products.
It's all about clear communication.
It's all about communication and organization.
The way they want to be communicated
yes,
with.
Yes.
So it's not just clarity of it, but also method or delivery.
Yeah, delivery method, yeah. And then having, taking time, and again, asking in that very initial phase, do they want us involved in construction administration? Because in some projects, and I've got one that right now where essentially I did the specs, turned them over to the architect incorporated everything into his drawings, and I'm not invited to site meetings because they didn't want to pay for that. And that's hard, because I find out then after that, oh, well, we decided we didn't want that carpet, and now that I'm picking paint colors to fight for it. Yeah, exactly. So this job, they said, oh, absolutely, we want you to be involved in construction administration. So again, that was another piece that we needed to know up front, and we have a standard format that we go through to kind of explain that. And offer to the client, do you want us involved? Yes, we want you to go to those monthly site meetings because we don't want to be there. We might come out in winter once and summer once, but we want you to handle all the rest of the months. And so that worked out really well. So we know all that up front, which then informs the construction documents and then all the CDs.
Can you talk about the CD phase or the CA phase with your team members and they understand what those phases are? Is it a universal language?
When you say team members, you mean my internal associates 3? No, you mean, no, it is with architects. Architects understand, obviously, the phases of a project. Most architects have done both residential and commercial work of some kind, whether it's light commercial or real extensive. So they understand it. Clients don't always understand it. So then you have to go through that education process. And really in our proposals, when we set that forward, we follow this exact process we're talking about. We talk about, okay, programming. Here's the delivers. Here's what we're going to do in programming. In schematic design, under fixed, here's what we're going to do. So we actually break it out into fixed and furniture because it's so different. Here's all the delivers on how the steps will unfold. At the end, we'll have a presentation to you. You basically tell us what you like, then we go into design development. Design development basically furthers the design. We get down more into the details. We narrow down the selection to one door hardware set that you're going to approve throughout the house, and what is the finish on that door hardware set, the specific tiles for every single bathroom, the specific design for the kitchen. And then as we move into construction documents, you have to kind of go through an education process with the client as to what that looks like. And talk through, construction documents and have the dialogue to say, because I've done it a multitude of ways, whether I am purely redlining the architect's drawings, so I'm providing him with schematic design intent sketches, he's incorporating that into his construction documents, and then I'm redlining them, and then we release the CDs, to a full set of specifications that go through all the detailed specs as well as the drawings, dimensions, et cetera, et cetera. So it can be everything in between.
So anything about construction documentation phase?
Construction documentation is so important.
Why?
And can be so much
so?
fun. So it's our tool to communicate the expectations to the contractor and to the subcontractor, to the client, and it's also the tool that is used in establishing the budget and finalizing the budget. Now on this house, we were lucky. Yes, there was a budget, but we had quite a bit of flex. If they loved something, they went with it. And powder room is a perfect example, as is the kitchen backsplash. So, on most projects, we don't have that kind of leeway, and we need to be designing to the dime right up front. This one we had more leeway, which is nice. It's nice to have the balance of the two. But CDs are essentially the legal document that the project will hold forever to say this is why we built it the way that we did. Architectural drawings are stamped for a reason. They're a legal document.
And there's liabilities
and there's
associated.
immense amount of liability associated with it, and it's the singular tool that everybody uses in the field. And when you walk into a construction trailer, there is nothing, I think, nothing cooler than to see your finished boards laying up against the wall, maybe with some stickies on them. Your drawings are unrolled, and they have scribbled all over them, and you can tell where they've talked to the tile installer or the millwork installer, and they're using them to build the building. They can't build it without it. Now, there are design build people out there that build it without drawings, but
really,
it happens, and it shouldn't, but it does.
So what makes them fun? Because a lot of designers seem to like the creative part, and they don't necessarily like that, okay, now we've got to get this on paper.
I am very unusual that way. I love the creative part, but I have a really nice balance, probably because I have German parents, of being organized. You know, every single one of my clients would always say that, Annette, you are not only the creative designer that we wanted, but you are so good at communications and so organized. So I'm a little addicted to being anal that way. For me, it's like, without having that final package, it's all nebulous. It's nothing. And until you start to document all these great ideas that we have and put it on paper, I love to sit down and figure out the layout of how things are going to work, and the sequencing of the layout of tiles, or, you know, the counter height, and are we doing a 36, or are we going a little higher because we have a tall client, and how are we going to fit all this in there? I love, it's like a puzzle. Yeah. Oh, it's totally creative. It's like putting a puzzle together. How are we going to make it work? We did this custom sink design in one of the bathrooms downstairs where we used slab ice stone material. And it was a, you see them all over now, but at the time they weren't as popular, where it's just a slanted piece of slab with the trough in the back, wall-mounted fittings. And I had seen a picture or something in California, and at the time they just weren't built yet. So sitting down and figuring out how that's going to be built and put together, I love that piece because it is creative. I think I'm really fortunate that I grew up with a dad who was a contractor, so I have that in my blood, so to speak, and there are times I wished I'd become an architect, but I think I would have been bored actually being an architect because there's so much more variety of what we do in our work as an interior designer. And I used to love sitting with my dad looking at his blueprints. He built schools, a lot of schools in Colorado, and then some commercial buildings and all of the homes that we lived in. And he would explain things to me. But Dad was, first he was a bricklayer and a journeyman and a craftsman, and he built all of our homes. So I was lucky that I got to see the homes being put together. So I think that's why I enjoy the CDs.
It's the puzzle piece.
Totally, totally.
And the number of decisions that you make in this phase?
Phenomenal, and can be extremely actually overwhelming. And I think that's where a designer sets themselves apart. If you can't take your conceptual ideas and your designs and communicate them on paper thoroughly, you're going to be a good designer but not a great designer. Because if you can't communicate that, how can you get it built? And that's where sometimes the designers, the industry in general, you know, we kind of sometimes hear, oh, designers are so flaky. It's like, I hope no one would ever say that about me, because it's so important that you make that transition from the creative side to the tangible, the deliverable of this is what we want built. Doesn't mean it's always right. God, no. And you'll see when we go through the drawings how many errors there are, you know, because the building doesn't always get built the way the architect has drawn it because of site conditions. And that's why those site meetings are so important in construction administration. And if you have a client who really understands the value of that, and that you will be there for them, you'll be their eyes and ears and expertise, subject matter expert, to make sure that the intent of the design actually gets communicated properly through the construction documents, but then also through the construction administration and being on site. And I love all those pieces.
As part of your construction documentation, what type of drawings do you do? You mentioned CAD.
I do all kind.
So tell me, give me some examples.
So this project is CAD drawings, just because that's made the most sense. We took the intent and then turned them into CAD. On a project that I'm working on right now, the client's like, you know, I don't need that level of detail. And that's a renovation project, so I just provide them with clear, thorough sketches, hand-drawn, quickly, not pretty drawings, but they still communicate what needs to happen. So that's, again, with your team. Typically it's had with the architect, if there's an architect on the project. So we determined early on with the architect that we would be doing CAD drawings, that we'd be using their backgrounds. They would provide those to us. So a background is essentially that the architect has put together all the layers of the building, from the floors to the wall assembly to the roof, and etc. We would get the background elevations, clean slate essentially, for each room, but that was tied right into the architectural floor plan. So we didn't have to figure out and confirm that the dimensions were right. We could pull right from his drawings. And then from there, we created all the interior elevations and the interior details. And that's what they used. They didn't then take those and reincorporate them into their drawings as a complete set. We had standalone sets. And sometimes that opposite would happen, where they would take, after we took the background CAD drawings, we fill in all of our details. Those then get sent back to the architect, and then there would only be one set of construction documents. This one actually had the architectural set and then the interior set.